tell you what I'm going to talk about today. Today, I'm going to help you think critically about predictions about AI. So one of my research areas is studying predictions about technology and where they succeed and where they fail. And the punchline is they almost always fail. So I'm going to give you a critical tool set for thinking about when you see a prediction about AI, whether good or bad, how to evaluate it for its credibility based on past research. So I'm going to start out giving an overview of AI 3 years into the modern large language model revolution that started with ChatGPT in late 2022. What's happened since then? Then we're going to see that there's a lot of anxiety and hope about AI, all the changes that are happening in society. Then we're going to focus on the predictions themselves. What is reliable about technology predictions? What is unreliable? And there are principles for telling the difference. Then we're going to use some examples to see how several predictions about technology and labor that were very confident failed spectacularly. And we're going to analyze the principles and why. And then finally, we're going to talk about the way forward. How can we nudge AI in a positive direction, a pro-social direction that helps bring us to the future we all want? So let's just start with an overview. Where are we today in artificial intelligence? So as Matt said, I was a former professional software engineer. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been studying AI and law for 20 years. For the first 17 of those years, my message was, AI is interesting, but it's not a big deal, broadly speaking. The last 3 years, I have said things have changed. Things have changed dramatically. AI is now a general purpose, increasing technology that's advancing like we haven't seen before. So things have changed. I was very much critical of the limits in the past, and then based upon evidence, the last 3 or so years, I've changed. So what the big moment that we all knew about was the release of ChatGPT in late ChatGPT 3.5 in late November 2022, followed quickly by GPT-4 in March of 2023. So about 3 years ago. And what surprised the world also surprised researchers. The vast majority of researchers did not expect such an exponential leap in capability. We thought it was going to be a slow, steady creep, and maybe the possibilities we see today, we would get maybe in 2030. So this is the theme. We're not good at prediction. But what's happened in the last 3 years? So we've seen a shift from models. These are AI models, particularly text prediction models that used to, by and large, produce one word at a time instantaneously to composite models. Models that spend some time thinking, reasoning before they answer, leading to better performance and verification on knowledge tasks. And also, the models are able to use external tools like calculators, web search, and a variety of programming tools. So this has been a big change. Last year, if you were here at this very time, we had a conference where we said, in 2025, the big thing is going to be agents. And we were right, because agents have taken over in the last year. If you talk to anybody in the tech world who's using AI, almost all of them are using various coding agents, whether it's Claude Code or a variety of systems out there where the system does some sort of semi-autonomous on its own planning and drafting in response to the user input. So that's really interesting. So that's changed. We've seen steady improvements in performance in the AI systems over the last 3 years. So for those who aren't familiar, one way we measure performance in the AI field is something called a benchmark. And in most cases, it's just a series of hard problems with known answers that we feed to AI models, and then we check how many of them they got correct. And we've seen really important increases from the early models in 2023, when many of these models were getting 5-10% of the answers correct, to today, where most of those models are saturated, which means almost every current model, whether open source or proprietary, gets all of them correct. So what they're having to do is create harder benchmarks, right? The old, easier benchmarks are no longer good. Now, as I'll talk about, this does not mean that AI is perfect. It's what they call jagged intelligence, which means it's really smart in some areas and not very smart in other areas in really unpredictable ways that you can only figure out by using it repeatedly. And it still suffers from problems, occasional, although decreasing, of hallucination and inaccuracy. So users have to be really careful still when trusting AI outputs for major decisions. But one of my areas of research is, how does AI work on intensive knowledge tasks, right? So these aren't really captured by the benchmark. So things like law, medicine, thinking, and roughly speaking, they're, in my estimation, they're increasing about 10% compounding each year. So if in 2023, it became 10% better in 2024 at a hard problem in law or math, solving more kind of abstract problems than it couldn't, the next year it was 10% on top of that. So slow, steady improvement, but steady. We're not, you'll hear a lot of things about AI hitting a wall. I am seeing no evidence of that at all. The ecosystem, we've seen the rise of the open source models, many of them from China. Some of them are competitive with the frontier models, and even the ones that aren't neck and neck with the frontier proprietary models like Claude from Anthropic, ChatGPT from OpenAI, and Gemini from Google are just a few months behind, which is interesting. We're seeing the economics shift dramatically. So for the same level of performance in 2023, say GPT-4, just as the state of the art, it's 1/100th roughly today for that same level of performance. We're seeing costs go down dramatically. That doesn't mean that AI costs less, because people are expecting higher performance and paying for the more capable models. But for some use cases, good enough is fine. Looking ahead, performance progress has been steady and increasing. I don't see any sign of it slowing down. But this is the important part. That does not mean we can predict what that means for society, for politics, the job market, for labor. What I'm going to show you in this talk is those predictions are notoriously unreliable, and I'm going to draw some distinctions, even if we do think the general predictions about AI improvements themselves are reliable. Okay, so where are we in the current moment? So you're hearing a lot of excitement from some quarters. AI, is going to lead to a world of abundance. Some people say, we won't need jobs because AI will fill all our wants and needs. That's kind of the extreme optimism, abundance view. On the other hand, we have sort of extreme pessimistic and negative view. AI is going to eliminate jobs. There will be no more jobs, deep uncertainty about the future. So we're kind of in this moment where some are very excited. There's a lot of anxiousness. And I want to acknowledge that. This is a time, what we know is definitely going on. There's a lot of change going on. And jobs are changing, but we don't know what the impact that will be in any detailed way. But things are happening. I think there's a lot of the anxiety we're seeing, anger about data centers for some quarters, are a manifestation of the general anxiety people are feeling about technological change. And this is a common phenomenon whenever there is an emerging technology, whether it be electricity or radio or telephone, something that's diffusing through society. There's generally social dislocation because people are uncomfortable with change, and it sometimes has hard consequences on people's lives, which we want to acknowledge. So there's a lot of justified anxiety out there. So what I want to do is equip you guys with a tool set for wading through that uncertainty, making good, critical distinctions. So on the one hand, nary a day goes by where, depending on how your social media feed is tuned towards you, what you might be getting optimistic predictions coming in, right? AI is going to solve all disease within 10 years, says Demis Hassabis, winner of the Nobel Prize. Jamie Dimon CEO says, here's what's going to happen. I'm predicting this. Your children are going to live to 100. There's going to be no cancer, and they're going to have 3-day work weeks, right? Well, he's a big business leader, so maybe we should believe him. On the other side, we see the other business leaders saying exact opposite doom and gloom, right? Bill Gates says all knowledge jobs are going away. Dario Amodei says, it's going to wipe out half of all entry white-collar jobs, et cetera. Even Bernie Sanders, longtime AI researcher, is getting into the claim here, right? 100 million jobs are going to be wiped out. So what should we believe? We're hearing two different stories: extreme optimism or extreme pessimism. So I can't give you the answer, but the best I can do is tell you how a researcher like me approaches this. This is how we critically analyze a question like that. And research suggests skepticism about all predictions, but especially the most extreme predictions. And in part, and this is the important part, no matter how confidently these predictions are stated, and no matter who states them, and I'll show you why in a second, but how people, they don't say kind of in a passive voice, this may or may not happen. Often, 100 million jobs will be wiped out, or we will have lives of leisure. I guarantee it, right? There's very little room in between. And often these are leading lights. Bill Gates, in one of the most successful business persons of all time, Jamie Dimon, famous CEO, Demis Hassabis, head of Google DeepMind. Surely these people know. And I'm going to show you, no, they don't know for various reasons. Nobody has a crystal ball because they're making predictions in fundamentally unpredictable areas. And research shows, when we go back, there are predictions by people just like them in unpredictable areas are unreliable. Okay, so what does a researcher do to make sense of this? Well, the best you can do is kind of systematically go and look at, historically, have we had moments like this, a big technological change? Were people making confident predictions with people of authority? And how well do those predictions come out, generally speaking? And the answer is terribly. Almost all of their predictions came out wrong in moments like this because, as we will see, what they're trying to predict is fundamentally unpredictable with any level of uncertainty. So in this talk, I will not give you certainty because, in fact, I will give you the opposite. I will promise uncertainty. So this is not a future about the talk of AI, but what this is going to give you is a tool set for you maybe to sleep better at night when in your social media feed or in the New York Times, an article comes out predicting some extreme future of technology, either positive or negative, and why. Importantly, we're going to look at the principles underlying this. And that can really I'm hoping this will reduce a lot of this anxiety that people have, because a lot of anxiety is projected into an unknown future. We certainly have anxiety about what is going on today, but a certain amount of anxiety is the unknown, what could or could not happen. And we often just defer to voices of authority because they seem like they know what they're doing and they talk very confidently. Okay, so the first principle is there are two very different types of predictions if you go back and look at the literature, some of which are reliable and some of which are unreliable. So what we're going to try and do is disentangle those, and I want you to try and observe them out in the wild. So on the one hand, predictions about technological trends based upon data can be reliable in ways that I will talk about. What is unreliable is what are the outcomes of those trends if they come true on society, on politics, on jobs, on institutions. Extremely unreliable. And many confident AI predictions conflate the two. All right, so let's take a closer look at this. So it is definitely possible to make informed predictions about trends in technology, and indeed, scientists and engineers do this all the time. But what kind of predictions? These are only certain types of predictions are reliable. First of all, the time frame has to be narrow. The most reliable time frame is 1 to 3 years. You sometimes see people projecting out confidently 10, 20, 50 years. Those types of long-term projections are notoriously unreliable, so take those with a grain of salt. But you can see short-term projections. So, and what projections? So what's the hallmark of such a trend? It's either grounded in current and past data, grounded in engineering constraints and principles, grounded in current research that exists today, or physical facts about the world, right? So if you look at the hallmark of current projections, take something like Moore's Law, which some of you might know about, and this was a rule about microprocessors that said roughly the number of transistors in microprocessors in the past doubled every 18 months. It's more or less says that. So that seems, how can you make that prediction? Well, you go around and you look at the underlying data about current microprocessor practices, what's the current research that is guiding us, and then reasonably you can predict out, within a margin of error out into the world. A similar thing is happening with graphical processing units. These are the chips that are used in AI. So AI uses a different type of chip. There was originally for gaming. This is, you've probably heard of NVIDIA, a big company that's made a lot of money. Similar type of thing is going on. You can kind of project out certain trends. Again, these are not perfect, but they're reliable in the sense that they're database, and they're not, they may go this way, they may go that way, but it's a reasonable trend. Okay, what people mistake is they conflate the technological trends with the impacts of those trends on society. If CPUs were to double in processing power in 5 years, or AI performance were to increase by 10%, what does this mean for society, jobs, politics, social institutions? Those are ridiculously unreliable, and I'm going to give you examples why. But the fundamental principle is the outcome of those depend on dynamics, complex systems, economic markets, psychology, nation states, social institutions, all these things that are far too complex for a simple technological trend to predict. And what's worse is there are pure unpredictabilities. So there might be a new technological invention on the horizon that we can't predict in energy or in computing, right? So there are things we can't even imagine. So the world is simply too complex to make any confident predictions about AI and its effect on society. Okay, but here's the pattern I want to cue for you. Be on the lookout for this in the media. So you'll have somebody like Dario Amodei or Demis Hassabis saying, I'm an expert in technology, and here's a trend I'm seeing. AI is getting better and better at this rate. So good, that's reliable. They're taking a highly reliable trend, but then they have an overly simplistic model of the way the world works, and it's not really their area. Demis Hassabis is not a labor economist. Jamie Dimon is not a cancer researcher. So they have an overly simplistic view of some other area of law, other area of society, and they say, therefore, this is what is going to happen in society. And that's overly simplistic, deductive prediction, either positive or negative. So let me just give you some concrete examples and what we can learn from this. Even economists aren't immune from this. So John Maynard Keynes, one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, famously and boldly in 1930 wrote an article called On the Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren. So what did he see? He said, look, in the Western world, what we're seeing is roughly 2% economic growth per year compounding due to technology, right? There's lots of technological innovations that happen and continue to happen, right? So he said, look, let us project that out into the year 2030, where we roughly are now. And by that time, economic gross domestic product and standard of living will have increased hugely by then, right? We can produce our wants and needs with much less resources. That was correct. All that happened. But so he had a strong economic trend driven by technology that he was right about. What he got wrong was his conclusion. He said, therefore, this is what will happen in society. We will all work 15-hour work weeks. Society in 2030 will be primarily one of leisure. All our wants and needs will be met. And things will be distributed evenly, right? So what was the mistake he made? He was right about the trend, but he had an overly simplistic model about what increased productivity does on society. He assumed that all that extra production would go immediately be substituted into leisure, right? But that's not what happened, of course. And then the gains would be equally distributed. But as people got more money, their standard of living went up. If $1,000 in 1930 could buy your food and your rent, then now many of us have that today, but we also need an iPhone and a computer and things like that. So psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, right? Along with our increased general wealth came increased wants and needs and new wants and needs that didn't even exist back then. So this is not to critique John Maynard Keynes, it's just to show you an example of an optimistic prediction error. We had a well-defined trend and then an unjustified, confident assumption about how that will play out in society. Okay, let's look at a pessimistic prediction. Another equally eminent person, so this is Geoffrey Hinton. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics. He's widely regarded as one of the godfathers of deep learning that it led to our modern AI revolution. Somebody I really respect from a technological level. But what did he do? So in 2016, AI was getting good enough that AI tumor detection systems were better than radiologists at the time at detecting tumors, right? And he was quite right about that. If you just did a pure technological match, the AI systems were better at detecting tumors than the radiologists. So, but then he made a confident prediction. By 2025, radiologists will go away. Why? Because we don't need them anymore. But by 2026, the exact opposite has happened, right? Radiologists are in demand more than ever. Their pay has gone up, et cetera. So what went wrong? Well, he had an overly simplistic model of the way the world works. And we're going to break it down, but this is the same pattern of error. He took a real technological trend. AI is getting better and better at spotting tumors. He said, therefore, I'm going to apply an unrealistic set of assumptions about the world and draw a confident conclusion in an area where I haven't studied the complexities, which is labor economics. So if he had spoken so he's a very smart guy, but he's not a labor economist. But I speak and work with labor economists, and these are people who study the impacts of technology on jobs. And it turns out it's much more complex than our simplistic model. So if a lot of these procrastinators would have spoken with people who study this, they might have come to a different conclusion. So we're going to diagnose, so to speak, what went wrong with this prediction, because I think it's really illustrative and will arm us with tools for analyzing such predictions about AI in the economy. So what do labor economists say? One of the biggest problems that people do is they confuse a task with the job, right? So economists see a job like a radiologist or a bank teller or a lawyer as a bundle of tasks, especially knowledge work. So a radiologist is not just a tumor spotter, right? Is a bundle of tasks, including, diagnostic, patient communication, analysis of the disease, interaction with other doctors, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the most major problems that people do in conducting this analysis, and this is what Jeffrey Hinton did, was they have an overly simplistic mental model or view of what a job is. So so they think, what's a radiologist do? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is they spot tumors, right? So therefore, if technology is getting better at that, that job is going away. But in fact, that is just one task among many. So we saw the same fallacy play out with ATMs, right? So ATMs came out in the 1980s, and there was predictions of widespread unemployment among bank tellers by kind of the lay public. Why? Because we sort of had an overly simplistic view of what bank tellers do. What do? Well, they give you money. That's what they do. But turns out that's not what they do. Again, it's a bundle of tasks, including loan management and customer management and all sorts of other valuable tasks. So instead of employment going down for bank tellers, the exact opposite happened. Bank tellers spent less time giving money to customers and could devote their time to other economically valuable tasks in their bundle of tasks. And that's a very common thing. We've seen this with lawyers. Junior associates used to spend a lot of time doing manual document review during litigation, looking at emails. This was substituted with electronic discovery. There were widespread predictions of unemployment of junior lawyers, but of course that's not what happened. Why? Because a lawyer is a bundle of tasks, and if technology frees you from one task and there is an economically valuable substitute where you can be shifted that's going to be productive using your skills, your job doesn't go away, it just shifts. And that's what happens. Okay, so that's the problem task diffusion. Another simple model we do is the mistake we made and Jeffrey Hinton made is the simple substitution model. So in our heads, a lot of us think, a human does this task, a technology comes and does it too, either almost as good or as good, therefore that task goes away, right? That's called the simple substitution model. In a small number of jobs, that is true when the task is completely replaced by the technology. So think how ditch diggers in 1900s were replaced by steam shovels, and manual mathematicians used to do manual calculations in the 1930s and 40s were replaced by computers. But that's not usually or necessarily what happens. People forget that technology can complement. Often technology is a tool which enhances knowledge workers. They can use the output of the tool to be even better than they were before. So this is what many believe happened to radiologists. It's not that the AI came in and took over the tumor spotting and put them out of jobs. In fact, it augmented their ability to make diagnosis. It became a tool to allow them to increase their quality of diagnosis and treatment care. And this is a very common thing that has happened in the history of technology, particularly in law as well. We see a tool such as Westlaw and LexisNexis electronic research. There's a prediction that the task will be substituted away and it will lead to less demand. In fact, it makes the lawyers more productive at their job because they can use it as an augmenting or complementary tool. So that's problem number 2 Jeffrey Hinton made. He used the simple substitution model. It's not always true, or not usually true, that the technology replaces the human task. Often it complements and augments their ability as they use it as a tool. So there's some nuance there. Another issue too is if Jeffrey Hinton had talked to labor economists, they would have told you about Jevons paradox. So this was a paradox first observed in the 1800s where engines became much more efficient that used coal. So people predicted this would lead to a decline in coal because your engines need less of it. But in fact, the exact opposite happened. It led to more coal. Why? Because in some cases, and it's hard to predict, declining costs leads to increased demand. So a lot of models think, the coal model thought, well, we have 100 people who are demanding coal, and now we have more efficient models. We'll still have 100 people demanding coal, but we'll need less of it. That's not what happened. as the cost went down, it went from not 100 people, but to 1,000 or 100,000 people. So the demand often will increase. It's not static, which actually offsets losses in capability. So you might think, wow, AI is automating contract analysis by 90%. That's not true. I'm just giving an example there. So you might naively assume we need 1/10 the lawyers, right? But not necessarily two, because of Jevons paradox, as cost goes down, there might be huge amounts of unpent demand, pent-up demand that are released when cost goes down. So the same mistake that could happen with computer programmers, where just in the last 8 months, AI coding has gone really good. I've been testing AI coding for 3 years and went from not that good to kind of good to really good. It's very good at this point. So a lot of people have said, well, therefore, don't send your kid to study computer science. All coders are going to be laid off. Not necessarily true. It's just too complex to predict. Many times we've seen Jevons paradox. If the cost of software goes down dramatically, there's all this pent-up demand for software at a low price, which could actually lead to increased employment for software engineers. Same thing could happen in law. So not that that will happen, it's just what labor economists will tell you, that's a dynamic that the simple model doesn't capture, and it could happen, and often does happen. Another error that's made is something called the lump of labor fallacy. So in 1900, 40% of Americans were employed in agriculture. And then along came the mechanization of agriculture, and the simple substitution model said, wow, we only need 2%, so 38% of jobs are going away, and 38% of Americans will therefore be unemployed. But that's called the lump of labor fallacy, which assumes that the amount of labor is fixed, and when automation comes in, job categories disappear forever. But the economy is dynamic. So what happens actually is, while it is true, people get displaced, and we shouldn't dismiss that, right? When technology, individuals get displaced, and they may not be able to be retrained in the short term. But that's different from saying jobs will generally disappear in the economy, which is what you hear people saying today about AI. In fact, the economy created huge numbers of new jobs that didn't exist at all in 1900. So today, only 2% of Americans are employed in agriculture, but we have a whole bunch of new jobs, data scientists, computer scientists, what have you, that didn't even exist. So be skeptical of the claims that jobs generally will go away. I think probably jobs will change in ways that we can't predict, but we shouldn't forget the well-worn lump of labor fallacy. Just because existing jobs go away doesn't mean that jobs generally go away. Okay, so this is the example I was talking about, where now 38% of Americans are not unemployed. Rather, the new generation were trained for new jobs in new industries, which the economy created. We can't guarantee that will happen, but again, as a researcher, you look back and you say, where was our thinking flawed, and what actually happened, and what lessons can we learn about it? Another question is timing and diffusion. So it's really hard to know how technologies will diffuse in the economy. So on the one hand, AI does seem to be diffusing quite quickly in some respects, in certain quarters. In other aspects, slower. But there's a difference between how quickly a technology diffuses in society and how long, and when its impacts are felt really broadly and strongly in the labor market. It was estimated that it took 20 years or 40 years for benefits of electricity to reveal in their productivity numbers, because organizations had to revamp their processes and their factories around electricity. We saw the same thing in computing in the 80s and 90s, where it took Solo's paradox, if people are familiar. In the 1980s, he said, the computing revolution is everywhere except in the productivity statistics, right? And that's because there was a huge lag. It took a long time, and it was kind of incremental. This may or may not happen in AI, but it's just something to flag. Electronic research in law started in the 1970s, but it didn't make real headway until about the year 2000 or so. And then finally, and this is the most important, jobs and employment are affected by many, many other things besides technology. In fact, technology is not even close to the most important thing. By far, the most important thing that affects jobs and employment is the economic cycle. Whether we're in a recession or the economy is doing well, that's the dominant force that affects things. But there's other things like global supply and demand and politics and tariffs and changing demographics. So the mistake is to think, here's a technological trend, therefore this will be the most important and dominant effect on employment. So that's another mistake that Jeffrey Hinton and a lot of these prognosticators could have made had they talked to labor economists who would say, technology is a factor, but you're oversimplifying. You're assuming it's going to be the dominant factor that is going to shape things, and that is not how the world works. All these different factors come into play in really unpredictable ways. Also watch for incentives. So just recently, this happened last week, a startup called Block said, we are laying off 4,000 people. Why? Because of AI. But was that really true? Well, a lot of people have expressed skepticism, which is this person had it. So the alternative message was, we made bad business decisions, our business is doing badly, and we overhired and we messed up. Or they could say, hey, this new productivity tool, which is making our business really great, is coming. So that's what we're doing now. So be skeptical of the motives here. What an economist would tell you, we actually won't know. The best and only reliable way is to look at the data, and probably we won't know for 2 years out in the aggregate whether AI is affecting employment. And even then, we have to isolate it in hard to detect ways from other factors like the business cycle. Similarly, media claims. The media have an incentive to serve you sort of extreme predictions, positive or negative, right? So even reliable sources about the facts, like the New York Times, which I'm a big fan of, doesn't have a crystal ball to know the future, right? So, but that doesn't stop them from routinely putting either extremely positive or negative predictions about the future of technology. And very rarely do they go back and say, you know what, we made these extreme predictions in 2010, and boy, were we wrong. That was irresponsible of us. So, there's a difference between reporting about the here and now and reporting about the unpredictable future. One is just much less reliable than the other. So, okay, so what can we expect? So I promised you no certainty. So we don't know, but what we do know is, yes, technological trends like AI do cause disruptions, and we shouldn't dismiss that at all. And I'm not saying that jobs will change, the way we work, society has changed. We just can't predict the details of how that will happen. I don't know if that's more reassuring or less reassuring. On the other hand, in general, technological revolutions, while leading to a lot of short-term instability, have generally led to more jobs, higher employment, and higher productivity. That's not necessarily going to happen here with AI, but it should at least be a framework to consider. Okay, so here's the tool set I've given you. When you see a prediction, be skeptical about technology predictions. Figure out, first of all, are they predicting what the trend is? What is that prediction based on? Is it based upon data or just their intuition? But we've seen the trend somewhere between 1 to 3 years out can be reliable. And are they predicting the impact of that trend on society, which is unreliable? Are they making a prediction about what will happen with jobs, what will happen with political institutions, what will happen with foreign politics, what will happen with sociology or human psychology? Very unreliable. So you can be skeptical and say they don't know. I want to empower you to say, I don't care if they have the Nobel Prize or they're a professor, they don't know. For the fundamental reason is that nobody knows. It's too complex and predictable, and the only informed decision is not to make confident predictions. So what can you do? Does that mean everyone's guess is as good as everyone else? No, actually, there are established ways of planning for environments of uncertainty. So the way people study this, think about this as, view this as a menu of possible futures and plan for those. Some of which are positive, most of which are neutral, and some of which are negative. And that's what policymakers should be doing, right? Rather than listening to people confidently predicting the positive or negative, the best way to do it is plan for a range of futures, recognizing that some of those futures are even ones we can't even predict, right? So you might plan for 10 futures, some of which are AI is enhancing productivity, some of which AI is leading to catastrophic, many of which are neutral, and then 5 more, which we can't anticipate because maybe a new technology like fusion or something like that comes along. The most important thing, though, is to collect evidence, measure what is actually happening. And the governments do a good job of this. They see are software jobs being replaced, are lawyer jobs being replaced, but it takes time. Unfortunately, the best you can do is wait and see what happens, collect enough data, and try and disentangle the effects of technology from other effects like the economy and globalization and et cetera. So in past changes, there's no guarantee here, but in past changes, 2% of jobs have been like the ditch diggers or the elevator operators who used to push the buttons on elevators, right? Completely eliminated. About 30% of jobs actually saw a decrease in demand and were disrupted. And about 70% of jobs were either neutral or actually had increased demand. So if it's anything like the past, the most likely thing will be, more positive than negative, but there's no guarantees, of course, because there are definitely meaningful differences in AI compared to past trends. It deals with knowledge work. It's happening faster than ever. It's a more general purpose technology. So what we need is adaptation. We need our institutions to measure, collect evidence, and adapt when they see evidence. But what they should be doing is being skeptical of confident predictions made without evidence. So that brings us to our conclusion here. How do we nudge AI in a positive directions? That's what this conference is about. It's not that you might think we can't do anything. It couldn't be further from the truth. We can do a lot. In fact, studying history, there are well-worn institutional governance structures and ways that we can nudge society towards a pro-social future. We can't guarantee it, but we can do active things now to make it more likely that positive things happen in the way that we want, that the benefits are more widely shared, that we take care of different communities, we take care of the environment, we focus on human community flourishing and thriving, we apply AI to specific problems of today. And that's what we're going to talk about today on our panels. We're going to see how are we able either to apply AI to improve specific known problems of today to make things better. And our first panel will be talking about that with trust and safety. And more broadly, we'll see how in later panels, how governance structures and institutional norms can push us in this positive direction. Because the history shows us we can definitely do this. So without further ado, let me turn it over to our next panel with moderator David Sullivan. So please join me up here, and thank you very much.